In the heart of Africa, where golden grass stretches as far as the eye can see and mighty trees stand like ancient guardians of the land, a tribe lived close to the earth. Their lives were woven with the rhythms of the sun and the rains, with the laughter of children by day and the crackle of fire by night. They had no walls, no roofs, and no houses to call their own. The sky itself was their only shelter, and the ground beneath them was their bed. For generations, this was enough. They believed they were free under the stars, watched over by the spirits of their ancestors. But freedom often carried a heavy cost. At night, when darkness spread across the savannah, the wild beasts came. Lions prowled the edges of their camp, hyenas laughed in the shadows, and leopards leapt into the midst of their cattle. Many nights were filled with screams, screams of mothers, of children, of men trying to defend their livestock. Every attack left wounds that could not be healed easily. Every loss of a child, every slaughter of a cow, tore into their hearts. Slowly, questions began to stir within the tribe. Why must we always live like this? Why must we accept danger as our fate? Why not build homes to protect ourselves, our children, and our animals from the jaws of the night? It was not an easy question. For them, building houses was a new idea, something their ancestors had never done. But their suffering had grown too heavy. One evening, under the great baobab tree, the elders gathered with the young men and women of the tribe. After long discussions, they decided it was time to change. The men went deep into the forest, cutting strong branches, carrying heavy logs on their shoulders. The women gathered tall grass, weaving it into thick walls and roofs. Children ran with clay and water, helping to seal the cracks. Together, they worked under the burning sun, their hands blistered, their backs aching, but their hearts filled with hope. Days turned into weeks, and soon, something beautiful rose from the earth. Where once there was only open ground, now stood huts, strong wooden frames covered with grass, clay, and leaves. Fires burned safely inside, smoke rising gently into the sky. For the first time, families slept inside walls that kept out the cold wind and the lurking beasts. For the first time, their cattle were penned safely within wooden enclosures. The tribe celebrated. Psalms were sung. Drums echoed across the plains. They had stepped into a new life, a life of safety and pride. But in the distance, unseen eyes were watching. A neighboring tribe, who still lived in the old ways, saw the new village with suspicion. They whispered among themselves, "Look at them. They think they are greater than us. They think they are wise because they have built walls. If they grow stronger, one day they will rule over us. We must not let that happen." Jealousy turned to anger, and anger turned to hatred. One night, when the moon was thin and the world was silent, the rival tribe gathered their warriors. Armed with spears, torches, and rage, they descended upon the village. The attack was brutal. Huts that had taken weeks to build were torn apart in moments. Fires spread, animals were stolen, and families ran into the darkness in fear. Screams of children echoed as their shelters crumbled to the ground. By dawn, what had been a proud village was nothing but ashes and ruins. The first tribe was shattered, but their sorrow quickly turned to fury. They had tasted a better life, and now it had been ripped away from them. The elders called the men together and declared, "We will not let this insult stand. We will fight for our honor. We will fight for what was taken." And so, war began. At first, it was a single battle, a clash of spears and shields. But the blood spilled that day called for revenge, and revenge called for more revenge. What started as one raid grew into a war that lasted years. The plains, once filled with laughter and songs, became a battlefield. Children grew up not with stories of peace, but with stories of warriors and raids. Every season brought new death. Families buried their sons, their fathers, their brothers. The earth drank deeply of blood, and the tribes became trapped in a cycle they could not escape. Years turned to decades, and the war seemed endless. Yet, amid the destruction, life went on. Babies were born, elders passed away, and the seasons kept changing. Both tribes suffered, but neither would surrender. Then, in the twilight of her years, an old woman rose. She had lived long enough to see peace before the war, and she had endured the endless cycle of bloodshed. Her hair was white, her body frail, but her spirit unbroken. She was respected by both tribes, for she had once been a healer, a midwife who had delivered children on both sides. She was not a warrior, but her words carried more weight than any spear. She called for a gathering. Under the same great baobab tree where the first decision to build homes had been made, she spoke. Her voice was soft, but it pierced the hearts of all who listened. How many more graves must we dig? How many more children must grow up as orphans? You fight to protect your homes, but look around, do you see homes? You fight for cattle, yet your fields are empty. You fight for honor, yet what honor is left in endless death? Her words fell like rain on dry soil. Warriors who had known only rage lowered their heads. Mothers wept openly, fathers clenched their fists but said nothing. Both tribes were exhausted, not just in body, but in soul. For the first time in years, silence hung heavy, not the silence of fear, but the silence of realization. They could not go on like this. Slowly, painfully, both sides laid down their weapons. Not in defeat, but in acceptance. They agreed to end the war. The old woman guided them to rebuild, not just homes, but trust. At first, the work was cautious. They built huts again, side by side, watching each other closely. They shared food, they shared water. Slowly, the walls of hatred began to crumble. The children, untouched by old grudges, played together freely. Their laughter became the new sound of the land. The cattle returned to the fields. The huts stood tall once again, but this time they were not symbols of rivalry, they were symbols of unity. The tribes had learned a lesson written in blood: true strength is not found in destruction, but in peace. It was not spears or warriors that saved them, it was wisdom, forgiveness, and the courage to choose a new path. Even now, when the sun sets over the African plains and the wind carries the sound of drums, the story of those tribes is told. Not as a tale of war, but as a warning and a lesson. For no matter how far humanity advances, we must remember, progress without unity invites conflict, but progress with peace builds a future for all. And so, under the endless African sky, their story lives on, not in ruins, but in hope.